Hello there. My name is Preeti and I work for Patoss, the Professional Association of Teachers of Students with Specific Learning Difficulties. Today I'm joined by Marcia Brissett-Bailey, who is an advocate for individuals with dyslexia. Her dedication to empower dyslexic learners and her tenacity to create awareness in the field certainly shines through in the work that she undertakes. Marcia serves as a trustee across a range of organizations in the UK that advocate for dyslexia. In 2022, she was named one of the top 50 influential neurodivergent women and also received the British Dyslexia Adult Award. In 2023, she was recognized as one of the top 80 neurodiversity evangelists in the UK. She's also an author and editor of the book, Black, Brilliant and Dyslexic, which showcases role models, their journeys, their successes, and the challenges they have had to face. So welcome, Marcia, and thank you for taking part in the short interview for Dyslexia Awareness Week 2024.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Today's discussion really stems from reading your book, Black, Brilliant and Dyslexic, which I have on my desk all the time. And I've also recommended it to a range of parents and young people that I work with. So you were diagnosed with dyslexia in your college years. Can you briefly outline the challenges you faced and why these were not recognized at school?
So yes, I can. So I always like to give context when I'm explaining something, give a picture. So I was retaking my GCSEs because I didn't get I got letters to my name, but they weren't all above A to a C. So I got one B, which was in drama. So it was when I was retaking my GCSEs at college, it was my government and politics teacher what said to me, Marcia, you're so articulate, you're an A every time in the classroom. But when it comes to transferring that onto paper, it doesn't reflect your ability and, what you know and your knowledge. So that is a real good indicator of what was happening. It may be different for different people, but for me, having schooled here, born in the UK, this didn't, and my knowledge and understanding what I grasped from my government politics, it didn't reflect. So that's a good indicator and just showing you one of the things, what was happening. I was not able to express what I wanted to say. So it would be really minimal. It would not really reflect my ability and understanding of the subject. Because I didn't have the skills, for one. And for two, I wasn't taught to really understanding a structure of an essay. And what I would do, I'd use a lot of words like and, connecting with the basic knowledge that I had got from school was the way I was writing, really, really basic levels, because all of those times from primary school to secondary school, maybe I missed whatever that kind of learning was because I wasn't there. I wasn't in that classroom sometimes. I was off doing something else. Yeah. So I didn't get those abilities. So does that make sense? So that's really to give you a picture of what was happening, but I wasn't given the tools.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm not going to be able to show up and be able to present myself to my true abilities for me and my learning and understanding because I didn't have the tools or the skills. And that's one of the things I know. If I had had the tools to write a full essay, I know for drama, I would have got an A, even though it was my one GCSE. So there's something for me around language. Having that kind of short-term memory is one thing, phonologically processing things, but sometimes I couldn't say the words that I wanted to say as well. So say if it was psychology, at that moment, my brain would just kind of go blank and I can't sometimes remember the things I want to express. So that can be happening alongside just to read the text. So there's so many intersections into what my brain's trying to do to show up on a day-to-day basis. So I don't know what Marcia I'm going to get because the dyslexia will have differences on different days. So I'm not more aware of that now. And there's some consistent patterns, but it was things like my short-term memory, my language, not in terms of vocabulary or my understanding being articulate in it, but sometimes I couldn't get the words out. my brain. I had to have a picture. So even in my in home life at the moment, if I want to remember something, I'm trying to write something down. I'll go, guys, this is the situation. This is the word I'm looking for. And then I give them the context, and then they go, it's this word you're looking for. Because sometimes it's just not coming up. So for me, it was spelling, reading, and it was not knowing about this kind of not phonologically remembering certain words or going blank. But in the first instance, it was my reading and developing strategies around spelling, because I didn't really know how to do phonics, if that makes sense. I understand the principle of it, but I never really took to it. I learned more like with whole words and chunking them down, which I thought was something that I learned and created myself, but now I know it's actually a thing. But that's how I just found it myself. So that's how I was getting by and how I was memorizing things. But it was when I was 16, to really just cut down the story, to get back to your answer, because I'm being very all over the place with my answer, because I like to give a whole story. But it was when I was 16, I learned strategies like look, cover, read, and write. Repetition that enabled me to know I had the ability, but it's how do I retain and store that in my memory bank, so I will be able to show up in with my abilities and find skills like how to write an essay and structure. I didn't have those in place. So of course I was at a disadvantage, because I had got missed and nobody had taught me that. For whatever reason, that wasn't something that I was given those skills to equip until I was 16.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, I come across so many students, that go through school undiagnosed and then they get to university, but the strategies they've built to help themselves are incredible, and that's such great strength. And it takes them through quite a bit. And I mean, certainly in my work, it's the foundation. Once I know they've developed strategies, it's to build on those, not actually to start all over again. So that's incredible.
Can I just mention also with that, it's about building confidence and trusting in yourself, because I think for a long time, because within my process of my journey, and it'd probably be another interview at some, but it's about, I experienced trauma. That's not going to be everybody's intersectional section, but trauma of feeling that I wasn't good enough. I was at that time with school where it was the red pen. So literally my whole work would be red, but nobody taught me how to do that. So slowly and slowly, my self-esteem and confidence got lower and lower and lower. I always say I love school, but school didn't love me. And so it was like I was showing up, never had to take a day off. And there's another thing around cultural perspective about always being that you have to show up, you have to do your best. But I wasn't getting a return on that. Does that make sense? So my confidence, we talk about imposter, sabotage, so all of those things were entwined in all of that. And that's, I feel, the damage of what happened for me at school to show up when I was 16. So I think that's really important, but it's not going to be everybody's story, because dyslexia is unique to the individual. And that's why it's important to talk about intersections to what your environment, your class, and how that may have an impact to how you show up. So I hope that's okay to share that.
Thank you. I mean, moving forward, your daughter's experience, also discussed in your book, is somewhat different, and her diagnosis came much earlier. What made that possible?
What made that possible, surely for one, is my own awareness and lived experience. I felt from about year 3, I was seeing that they were reading books like Floppy and Chip. Now, Floppy, there's only so many times you can say that that's Floppy and think, oh, there's a pattern there. She's not reading it phonologically. There's something not quite right. So this is memory. We're working with our memory in order to remember some words. So I approached the teachers and they said, but she's in PAL, the word they used in PAL with her peers. So she's fine. So maybe it's me worrying, because dyslexia is genetic and it does run in families. It was always my, not concern, but I was always aware and alert to be looking out for it. So was this me being consciously overconscious that she's dyslexic? It really wasn't there as for her. But I think that's what helped me in a way. But it was also, it's not a fear, but it was just because I know what the experience can be like with a system that's not designed for you. What could happen if you don't get it or nip it in the bud in terms of those early interventions. So year 3, by year 5 now, I insisted on an assessment because we're still having the same things. But I think with my daughter, whether we were saying there was masking, whether it was her environment that was engaged, helping her to show up and use her strengths to be the best she can, she was still doing well in the school, in her classroom. So we have to remind ourselves all of those intersections in your environment. Dyslexics don't, necessarily always be, they can't read, or they can't, because they may have early intervention support, what gives them the, different tasks and skills to show up in this classroom. So it was when she was 4 going into 5, just for the summer, we did an assessment, and it says it's highly likely that, or there's a possibility of dyslexia. So it was from then, the next term before she went to year 6, we had the assessment through an educational psychologist. Now her school, they have they buy in the service. So she had an educational psychologist. They had 2 a year. So you can imagine, for a whole school, 2 diagnosis for the year. So she was lucky to get one of those in year 6 before she transitions to secondary school. And so it was clear to say that she was dyslexic. And on her assessment report, it said high dyslexic. I don't know what that meant, but it said it was high. And her diagnosis just broke down everything what was going on for her, and showing her spiky profile. So I hope, again, I love to talk, and I give so many pictures. I hope you've got a sense of that. So we had to fight for it for 2 years, though. But I'm somebody who's aware. So let's think about parents who may not be confident, also may have maybe neurodiverse themselves and not even know, and feeling fearful to speak to authority or push that forward. You get missed because you're fearful as well. So there's a whole combination of things why children or young people may get missed for various reasons. But my daughter's quite fortunate that I was aware enough to, to sort of push that through to get that early, diagnosis.
Yeah. I mean, that leads me on to, you're a great advocate, but for those parents that don't know what to do, what type of advice would you offer?
I think it's so important, if you can, have a relationship with your school. And in the first instance, if you're suspecting something and you see a pattern, even in yourself, that you're thinking, I know this is something I might have struggled with at school. And I think there's something happening similar, even if you don't, it's speaking to your special education, the SENCO, the school SENCO, or the school lead in inclusion, whatever the title is in your school. I think that's the first place I would go. But it's building that rapport and trying to have that relationship with school. Also looking at the SEND schools policy and looking at what support for, there is available for, for your child or young person. But my first instance will be speaking to the inclusion manager or SENCO for the school to say, these are my concerns, set up a meeting and say, these are my concerns that I'm having with my child when it comes to reading, or something that you see that may not be, it's really hard because you don't want to compare with your if you've got other children. We don't want to do that, but sometimes it's clear that there's something happening because they may not be doing, but we all do things differently, don't we? But that's my first thought anyway, is to speak with your school. I did 2 things. I was a trustee of a local organisation near to me in another borough, and I did an assessment with them as well, and my daughter did end up doing tutoring with them. So I had another pathway. So you could look out to speak to local, if there is a clear assessment and it does highlight that in schools not able to do a diagnosis, you could speak with local associations of dyslexia if it possibly is dyslexia.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope that's helpful.
Oh, that is very helpful. Some experiences in the book, discuss the myths and beliefs around dyslexia. Some cultures believe that, children that don't or have problems with reading, writing, and spelling, it may be as a result of them being lazy or them just not working hard. I mean, certainly in my experience, I've heard parents say that an evil eye has been cast upon the child and a visit to a religious priest may help. I often get asked the question, is there medication that the child can take? So what can be done to change these misconceptions so that there is more awareness of dyslexia, its challenges, but also its strengths?
Well, you want the bigger picture talk or the general talk? Because we know our systems are not universally designed. So that's a bigger conversation, isn't it, in terms of what is real inclusion look like? Whether we look at the Walnut report of our going to our local schools, but what does those schools look like? So we've got lots of parents wanting special schools or dyslexic schools or schools, which is interesting because we moved away with that, but now this is what we have in terms of some parents. But the myths, they are real. So we need to have conversations. We have those coffee mornings in our schools. Let's bring those, to the forefront, to have these conversations. I'm not saying once a month, but a quarter, about different neurodiversity differences and what that looks like. We need to be having the schools need to have better relationships with their families, whether it's carers, whether it's parents and other professionals. And we talk about that multidisciplinary way of working. We really genuinely need to do that. We need to listen to the views and wishes and feelings of our families and the young people. We need to do more of that. But it's a lot of combination of things, isn't it? So that's one of those things, is having those kind of relations. So we do have, I used to work for one, a SENDIAS service, and there are like family support forums within your local authorities or counties that you can start to have better relationships with as well. And having a parent voice that in those ways, that's possible. There's statutory to have in each county or borough those parent forums to sort of have impact and attend meetings for the local authorities that you live within. So that's another way of getting some information advocate. But the myths, like you said, is true. So I've worked with families who will say that God will save, but I think some of that stuff is about trust. We're talking about, minority groups or global majority groups.
That's right.
There is about trust and feeling safe, or feeling if I say this, something's going to happen or my child's going to be taken away. So and those are the real intersections. So that's why we've got to build better relationship and communication about what this means, and have an easy read to some of that as well, because we have to make assumption not all of our parents have access to the kind of information where the terminology is just very difficult sometimes to understand. We need more training with our staff as well to feel supported, because we have to remember they're doing the best they can, but they need to have continuous training when it comes to neurodiversity, dyslexia, etc., ongoing and keeping up to date. And I feel like our professionals, like our OT, our speech, because how are we assessing, and what does dyslexia look like in me? What does it look like? We already know from ADHD that it was more assessed on boys, so rows of cars, etc. It may be not something that some girls do. So we were missing some of the signs. From a diverse community, it may be something different. I'm not saying that we're different, but things that will appear differently for various reasons. And that's things we need to start unpicking and start having the conversations. It shouldn't be fearful. So it's continuous communication, I think, continuous bringing awareness all the time, because it's just not going to be solved like that, because it's about our infrastructures that are not quite right and designed in a way that includes everybody. So I don't know if that's giving you a kind of solid answer, because the myth of dyslexia is real. I don't look or sound dyslexic for sure. No, I don't. So it's a hidden difference. The way my brain is processed, more focused on my right side. It gives all of these things that can be richness for the world, but also there are still challenges. That's why I say I'm dyslexic daily. It varies, but that's me, and I have to learn to live with myself in terms of how I show up. But the infrastructure, and that's why I have to have reasonable adjustments, because they don't fit the way and I've had to learn and embrace that in different ways, so I can show up and be able to be who I am without feeling just always like, how am I going to show up today, because that's not there, or that support's not there. Do you see what I mean? So I have to learn to advocate for myself as well. So we want to have that sense of being able to advocate as well. So giving those skills, it's constant communication, constant awareness, and growing together. It's okay for a school not to know everything, or a college to not know everything, but if we can work it through together as well. So I hope I'm giving you a little bit of
that's really
response.
That's really useful. I mean, certainly with parents I work with, when I assess children and I give feedback. I often say your child is not only dyslexic at school, your child is also dyslexic at home. So what are you going to do for that all-rounded support for the child? So no, certainly I think partnership is really important.
Yeah, partnership and collaboration is the thing we want to have. And I know it can be hard. It can be hard. But schools have to be more open. It doesn't stop at the school gate. And I mean, family support groups, I think schools still have mentors, and it's just those conversations of being, as parents, feeling confident to ask.
Yeah.
Because I from a cultural perspective, I learned you don't ask because that's almost like a weakness. But we have to ask because that's how we're going to get the best for our children. And we are the expert on our children. I'm sorry to say, I'm not a teacher professional, but I am an expert on my child because I'm with that child all the time. So please believe me, see me, hear what I'm saying. I want to be understood as well and be included in the relationship that you're supporting my child with, in terms of knowing everything that I can to my best ability.
No, thank you. Thank you. Just in your book, I mean, there's so many inspirational stories of Black men and women who have been diagnosed with dyslexia and have gone on to do so well. It's incredible. Their journeys are incredible. What advice do you offer for people of color to initiate a journey from diagnosis to owning their dyslexia?
Oh, that's a big question. I'm having to think a little bit about that. I mean, you see, what I want to say is that that book only tells you the stories of those who got through. There's so many stories I didn't get to tell. Who did, what if you don't go to university? What happens? I speak to lots of adults who still haven't managed to read or learn to read fluently, in a way that, they feel they can show up in their workplace, and having to still master. So I feel the book has done something that I'm so proud of, in terms of being able to get voices that we don't always see. So we all know, if we was to do, we'll think of all these people who are famous and dyslexic. It's not going to look like the people in my book.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted. I want academia. But in terms of that question, on terms of Black and brown and people, and it's a really difficult one because the intersections are real, the systematic barriers. We can't shy away from talking about race and people feeling excluded and don't feel safe or belonging. So these are all embedded into our structures. So it's very hard for me to speak. I can only speak about my own experience. I think it's very hard to speak for a community or a group or a global majority of people, because our experiences the way we show up day to day is different because of those intersections, whether it's class, you have privileges. It's a really hard topic. So I feel, it's so many different factors to that in terms of how we can show up. But what I can say for myself is that I've continued to just try to strive and believe in myself. I've had to do a lot of self-love and healing from seeing things that didn't feel like it was me. And I had to find my own way around that as a Black woman, because all of being a woman, being Black and dyslexic are all of me. I cannot choose between those. How I pivot, navigate in the world is determined by societal views, but I try to break some of those barriers and change the narrative. And that's all I can do. I'm just doing my little bit. And like those in the book, they're doing their little bit to whatever. Yeah. So it's a really hard and big question. I don't think I would do it justice if I responded to it without a few more voices, because I can't speak for everybody.
No, I mean, certainly. I mean, I think what I find, like with the students I work with, because these stories are so real, they resonate with them, I mean, I know certainly with one of the students, we read some of the stories together, but I think because they're so real, they definitely do resonate. So I think when they hear something that's actually not something in the air, or, something they can relate to, they certainly do respond.
And that's the beauty. And I thank you for sharing that with me, because that makes me feel, it's not even, I don't want to say tearful. Sometimes I do get emotional because the journey's been hard, and I'm where I am, and I'm still navigating work with my daughter, and knowing that it's bigger than us in terms of our structures and systems. It's not just about money. It's about thinking outside the box, being creative, being partnership driven with schools as well, to work with grassroots organizations. We need to think differently to how we approach it, and not looking, it's not a defect. So we know that it's a difference. So it's not new. So how do we do something different to the structures that we have? How can we do that and be creative? Creativity is really key in all of this, to how we can think differently, to work collectively, to make change, because our young people are telling us they don't feel like they belong. They're telling us that, and trauma's real. And so you know, our young people will become adults. So this is where what we're doing here, even this conversation, is doing some of that work to bring awareness, to give an understanding that we need to make change, because our young people become adults, and the cost of, I'm just saying, even not trying to link to mental health, but the cost will come out in different ways if we don't do the work now, so we can have confident young people who strive to be adults and celebrate if that's what they want to do. Because I don't celebrate being dyslexic every day, but I don't even see it's a superpower for me, but I understand why it will be for someone, because I do think I bring something great to the table, if that makes sense. And
You do.
so we need to have that diversity on the table, don't we? So again, I'm probably not answering the question, but I love the conversation, because this is what we're not having all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, so thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking part in the short interview. And I know you have so many projects on hand, so good luck with all of that. I look forward to following you in your journey and chatting to you and just sharing experiences, because I think the more we talk about this, the more we can create the awareness and help the young people and dyslexic adults out there, or children. So good luck with all your work, and I'll definitely be in touch moving forward.
Thank you. I just want to say lastly, and just thank you for that. It takes not just a community. We believe it takes a village. So it's a collective. So us having this is part of that community and taking that village. It can't be just done by one person. It's got to be a village, if that makes sense. So thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.